I got to my phone just in time. Trying to unlock it with wet fingers wasn't the most pleasant thing to do, and I made it before it went off. Sorry, honey, I was in the shower. I'm all slippery and wet. Damn, I thought you were saving yourself for me when I got home tomorrow night. Who made you so slippery and wet? For a millisecond, my pulse jumped before his mouth quickly turned into a beautiful smile that told me he loved me. Silly, I was in the shower. You called 5 minutes early. I'm still soapy and I have conditioner on my hair. He let out his sexy chuckle, his teeth flashing white as he slowly shook his head. We have a little problem, so everyone's busy on the platform. I need to fill in, so I'm calling earlier. His smile faded. Why did he pause in his sentence? That alarmed me. He regained his composure and his smile returned, at least partially. I suddenly wondered if he saw something here that might give it away. Jimmy, are you okay? You look like you've had a sudden realization. Sorry, Jade, something important's come up. I gotta go. Weather permitting, the chopper should be here in the morning. It's like these 3 weeks are getting longer and the 2 weeks you'll be home seem short. I want you back in our bed so badly. Just tell Jade and I'll drop everything. Money doesn't matter. But we do. I've been saying all these 5 years, if you want me to get a job on shore and not on those gas platforms in the North Sea, don't be afraid to ask for what you want. This job means a lot to you. Plus, the pay is prohibitive. I love you, Jimmy, and I promise we'll make up for 3 weeks of missed fun. I love you, Jimmy. I'm serious, Jade. I'd rather get a job at the supermarket than lose what we have. I loved you, Jade. I'm sorry. I gotta go. I felt uneasy, as if he'd said loved me rather than I love. I must be getting paranoid. But something was bothering him, like something had happened during the video call that made him change. I looked around. There was nothing there to give me away. I'd been so careful to cover my tracks and make sure everything looked normal. My special time was carefully planned so as not to arouse suspicion. On Friday nights, I would go out with the girls and be a model wife, never dancing with any of the men who were always hitting on us at the club. Back I'd take a cab with Jimmy's sister Beth, who'd drop me off first. And then I'd ring the doorbell, knowing his security camera was signaling him that I was home. I'd get up, throw my coat off my shoulders, and kiss him on the doorbell camera, knowing he'd look at it later. I had never given him, or anyone else for that matter, the slightest reason to doubt that I was anything but a faithful wife who once a week spent an evening with her girlfriends while my husband traversed the perils of the North Sea to maintain our fantasy life. I removed a new set of electric-colored underwear from a hook on the bedroom door. Still in its packaging, it was attached to a cardboard two-dimensional detail of a torso showing how it all attached to each other. Full of various clamps, it essentially formed a harness. Add to that pale blue stockings and a thong to match, and I could see that I was sexy as hell. I shuddered at the thought of having to show it to Dan, and up close and personal. Our dates were quick and lusty, with no foreplay, dinners, dances, or the subtleties of seduction that are part of a typical relationship, if you consider my marriage to Jimmy typical. For the past 18 months, it had been the same. Jimmy would leave for work on Fridays. I would pack up and drive to the club at least an hour before the other girls. As soon as the cab dropped me off at the club, I would enter through the back service entrance. My body knew what was waiting for me, and my skimpy underwear was always damp and sticky before I reached Dan's office. I'd walk in, close the door, and Dan would relieve me of everything I was wearing. He insisted that I wear at least some underwear, and over the course of our dates, my collection had grown considerably, so much so that I had to box most of it up and hide it in the depths of our large, mirrored built-in closet. Dan would get up and walk around me, devouring me with his eyes with the look of a hungry wolf. At 5'9", 175 centimeters, in heels, possessing what Jimmy said was a perfect body and gorgeous long red hair, I knew I had it. Dan wanted it, and he was taking it. There was no love in it, just a release for both of us. He told me what a dirty slut I was. All the humiliation and insults only increased my sexual pleasure and release each time it came, and that happened more than once during our brief encounters. As soon as he was done, I would go to the bathroom to clean myself up, change into fresh, normal underwear, and stuff the soiled underwear into my purse, and then walk out the back door and to the front of the club to join my not-so-smart friends, including my sister-in-law. They all thought I had just arrived, not realizing that I had already been on top of them for at least an hour, trading my body and soul for narcotic pleasure. Everything repeated itself in the same format as every Friday night. Some wine, a few cocktails, lots of conversation, laughter. We danced together, and some danced with random male partners. But not with me. I always turned them down. And when they were a little more persistent, I'd raise my hand and shake my wedding ring. But that was a secondary reason. Dan had told me in the beginning that if I danced with another man at the club just once, I could forget about coming to his club ahead of time. I needed the sensations he was giving me, something I couldn't and wouldn't ask my husband for, so I tried to honor his request. After a fun night out, I drove home with Beth, my sister-in-law, and we giggled and chatted. After she dropped me off, I walked up to the driveway and rang the doorbell. Looking up at him, I leaned forward and kissed the air as sexily as I could, telling Jimmy I missed him before opening the door and walking in. At some point during the night, he saw this and sent me a little emoji kiss on WhatsApp in return. When I woke up in the morning, I saw that he had written me a message, but it wasn't quite what I expected. It simply said that there was a problem and he was running late, but would be home on Monday. I started to worry. Did he really know something, but how? He had never been to the club, so there was no way he could have set up a camera there. Dan advised me to always linger and look in my purse for a few minutes before entering the club, but to look around. Did the car pull into the parking lot after the cab? Are there no cars in the parking lot from which someone is watching me? If for some reason I thought I was being followed, I had to enter the club through the front door. Of course I didn't miss anything, did I? I chalked it up to a malfunction in the rig. It had happened before, but I felt uneasy. Saturday morning, I washed new underwear, as everything I wore for Dan was guaranteed to be stained. The night before, Dan had fucked me at the end of our game. In the middle of the morning, a text from Beth arrived on my phone. Jimmy texted her that he wouldn't make it back in time and asked if she would take me shopping on Sunday. Her husband Stan was playing golf that day, so we took the train to London and did just that. I was excited that he was supposed to be home the following evening, but was saddened when I received a text message in the middle of the day saying he wouldn't be home until Tuesday. There were no emoticons in the message, just text, which was uncharacteristic of our communication these days. I immediately replied to the message with a sad face, a kiss and a couple hearts, and waited. Nothing came in response. I called him, but the call went straight to the answering machine. A few minutes later, Beth's phone beeped to let me know a message had arrived. When she read it, I was sure her eyes rolled and looked at me for a moment before she typed a reply and put the phone back in her purse. She looked up at me and smiled, but somehow not in the same way. They can't know. I'm covering my tracks and the evidence just isn't there. But I still felt uneasy. I asked her, was there something important? She literally looked me straight in the eye. It was Stan. Apparently one of his friends had just found out that his wife was cheating on him. I felt my heart jump to my throat. She seemed to be looking right into my soul. Oh, that's terrible. Do we know them? She was still looking into my soul and replied, yes, we both know him, but not her. She's a stranger to us. I felt uncomfortable. I wanted to ask something else, but considered it a good idea to keep silent. On Monday and Tuesday, I cleaned the house again. My new soiled laundry was now clean and dry and joined the large collection I had amassed over the past 18 months. I began to think that it would now be wise to sort through it and get rid of some of the stuff, but the idea hurt me as it wasn't all cheap, and it wasn't meant for my husband. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe I should start using some of it by the time he gets home. He said he should be home around 4:30, so I headed to the gym at 12 to try and calm my mind before he got there. After the first time I slept with Dan, I was sure I had the word guilty tattooed on my face, even though I made every effort to act natural when Jimmy came home. But Jimmy didn't say anything. This tattoo of my shameful act was just not visible to him. After realizing this, I realized I would be safe if I followed simple rules. Act normal, don't try to compensate, don't say no to my husband, and my affair didn't happen anywhere but Dan's office during those girls' nights out. When I returned from the gym, I was shocked. Jimmy had already returned and was sitting on the terrace, looking across the garden at Conisbrough Castle in the distance. I went outside to listen to the light rustling of the trees and the birds singing. Jimmy sat there, not getting up to hug me. He just turned his face to me with a blank expression and stared at the garden again. I felt my heart beat faster and a terrible knot formed in my stomach. How long, Jade? I hadn't expected such a question and tried to think fast. There was nothing that could give me away or have a rational explanation. Jimmy, what are you saying? What are you implying that I'm having an affair? He turned and looked at me, his face expressionless. I'd seen it before when we'd sometimes get together with friends and family for an evening out, the guys playing poker and us girls drinking and chatting. I stared at his best poker face. The silence continued and I felt a tear roll out of my eye. Jimmy, I didn't do anything. He stood up and picked up a box I hadn't noticed beside him, then dumped its contents on the table. 18 months of worn underwear lay in a pile. He sat back down, turned, and looked at me with an expressionless face. I felt like cursing, but that would have given me away. I needed to play his game. You put 2 and 2 together and you get 5. I missed you. It's not what it looks like. I get lonely when you're not around, so I started buying lingerie, and I loved looking at myself in the mirror. I wanted to make sure I still looked sexy, make sure you still wanted me. I felt embarrassed at how much I had bought, so I shoved it in a box in my closet. I thought you'd be mad at me for spending so much money. You're wrong, Jade. I don't care how much you spent to show me how beautiful you are. But I'm not the one benefiting from what I think is now a tasteless pile of junk you've soiled. He lowered himself to another chair and pulled out a large brown manila envelope. It had a small bulge on it, meaning it wasn't empty. He put it down in front of him, then looked up at me with the same face and said nothing. I looked at the envelope and fear gripped me. What had he gotten? And how did he know? I needed a clue to at least try to limit the possible damage. His sister's remark about her husband's friend led me to believe she was referring to my marriage. When she said, "We don't know this woman," she was referring to the other me, the one who had broken her wedding vows. I was in trouble. What's in the envelope, honey? The truth, Jade, just the truth. Then you have to show me what's in there. I have nothing to hide. If you think I've done something wrong, something that's come between us, you're wrong. It'll be a simple misunderstanding, trust me. He bent over the table and started going through the things scattered on it as if he was putting on a little show. Then he found the blue underwear I'd worn on Friday. Did he like seeing you in it on Friday? I jumped up from my chair, leaned over the balustrade separating the decking from the garden, and exhaled dryly for a few moments, now shaking violently and tears streaming from my eyes. I racked my brain, wondering how he could have known about this. As I stood there, frantically thinking, his voice brought me back to that moment, saying 3 words that no partner in a relationship wants to hear. We need to talk. I looked at him, and he nodded to the chair across from me. I sat down and looked at his face. There was no emotion on it, just the same poker face I'd seen a few minutes ago when I got home and my world was starting to crumble by the second. Jade, look at me, okay? Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to hand you this envelope so you can have a copy of all the evidence of your infidelity, and you'll only get one chance. I want you to tell me the whole truth from the beginning when it started. I didn't do anything, Jimmy. Please, please believe me. I finally broke down and sobbed, barely breathing. Whenever I looked at him, he was sitting there looking at me, impassive and emotionless. Jade, I know this is hard for you. Let me explain it to you. I want to hear it from you, your words from your mouth. I won't move from this chair, and I promise I won't touch you, okay? But you have one chance, Jade. If you want to keep up the act, I'll make sure that all family members, friends, former work colleagues, neighbors, and even the couple who run the pub know the contents of this envelope. Take your time. I hope that if you start from the beginning, leave no stone unturned, I can understand why and try to find a path to forgiveness. So, on June 20th, 2022, you, Jade Thomas, will tell your husband, Jimmy Thomas, the truth about your infidelity without fear of violence or malice toward yourself. As they say, the word is yours. I felt tears flow from my eyes. He was so calm and collected. Obviously, he knew, though I couldn't understand how. The threat of being crushed by the contents of his envelope made me decide that I had to tell the whole truth, the whole sneaky truth, and hoped that eventually he would forgive me and we could pick up the pieces. I started crying uncontrollably and couldn't move. He obviously anticipated that I would struggle and poured a glass of ice water from a pitcher he had placed on the table. He went back into the kitchen and picked up a box of tissues. "I'm sorry, Jade. I knew you would need water, but I didn't realize it would hit you so hard. Here, take the tissues. When you're ready, shoot." I tried my best to wipe my eyes, but I couldn't look directly at him, so I focused on the glass of water in front of me before I spoke. "First of all, Jimmy, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I did it, and I'm sorry you found out and it hurt you. I wasn't actively looking for someone. It just happened. It kicked up a perfect storm of shit in my life when you weren't there to help me." I heard him take a deep breath, and when I looked up, I saw his gaze harden as he exhaled air through his nose. I realized why. "I'm sorry, Jimmy. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just stating a fact. I was alone and things were going downhill. The first blow came when I was downsized. We had no idea COVID was going to stop the world. If I had known, I wouldn't have jumped ship into the fledgling business. If everything had been normal, I would still be working there, but as you say, stuff happens. Then there was COVID itself. Yes, the whole blockade was over, but it was so hard for me to be alone, especially without any real neighbors. Until you came home, I felt like a real prisoner, a bird in the gilded cage we call home. And things slowly went back to normal when things normalized. A lot of the girls couldn't go out for various reasons, so life was very low-key until that happened. It was that week when my car broke down and I was on my way to a job interview in Sheffield, and they basically said on the phone that the job was mine. But of course I never showed up for the interview and they gave the job to someone else. And the next day, the washing machine broke down unexpectedly, even though it was only 3 months old. On Friday, we went for a walk and the girls remarked that I looked depressed, which, of course, I was. When we left and were almost home, I realized I had left my phone behind. Beth called and was answered by the owner of the club. The phone was given to the manager and I could pick it up whenever I wanted. It was my only way to stay close to you when you were at work, so the cab took Beth home and I went back to the club to get my phone. They directed me upstairs to the office of Dan, the club owner. I knocked and walked in and he was sitting at his desk. He got up and walked over with my phone and I started apologizing for leaving it behind. As he held out his hand to hand it to me, I could smell his aftershave. It was yours and my favorite obsession. It made me think of you and I burst into tears, putting my arms around his shoulders and sobbing heavily. He let me cry and put his hands on my back, gently running them up and down my sides. I needed this right there in that very moment, and for the first time in my entire life with you, I let my emotional barrier crumble. I turned my head and our eyes met, and the next moment we were already kissing. I realized what I was talking about. It hurt. I stopped and looked at Jimmy. He was sitting again with an emotionless expression on his face. "So we have a plausible reason why you fell off your pedestal that time, but it continued, Jade, right up until last Friday. Why, did he blackmail you, have some kind of power over you that made you come back?" I have to understand why. It was quite clear now that he knew almost everything. Somehow he must have been warned or had suspicions. I had to assume that the envelope had come from a private detective, but I didn't know how far it went. "I could tell you why, but it would hurt you, Jimmy. Are you sure about that?" He made a small, expressionless nod to continue. And I continued from the moment in Dan's office I was describing. As he kissed me, his hand reached down, pulled up the hem of my dress, and gripped my buttocks tightly. He pulled me to him. He began lifting me and I'm sorry. I lifted my legs up and closed them behind him. I reached down, and I unbuttoned his pants. I looked at Jimmy. He had his eyes closed, and a single tear rolled down his blank face. I started crying hard, repeating the words of regret over and over until I was practically hyperventilating. "Was he a better man, Jade? Is that why you kept coming back? I guess you love him since you buy and share all that lingerie I don't remember seeing on you." I jumped up from my chair and tried to move toward him to hug him, but Jimmy calmly raised his hand and stopped me, telling me to sit back down and finish telling the truth. I was a broken woman, and I was sure my husband was broken too, behind the facade he was creating. He wasn't better, but he was different, very different. You're loving, tender, you're thinking, and you fulfill my sexual needs and desires probably more than your own. It's slow and sensual, and I love the way we climax over time, all those years of sharing and exploring our bodies. I love you, Jimmy. I fought to hold back my tears. I meant it. I jumped up from my chair again, but this time I squeezed past his hand and clung to him as my tears spilled onto his shirt. Normally his hands would reach out to comfort me, but today they lay still, resting on the arms of the chair. He spoke softly. Please, Jade, sit back down. This is the hardest part of the rest of our lives. Let's get through this. I have a few questions, Jade, if you don't mind. I nodded as he began what was beginning to resemble an inquisition. How often, Jade? Every Friday when you were working, I went out with the girls. No, Jade, that wasn't the answer I wanted. How often did you finish during your session? I didn't want to answer, but he already knew the answer. I could barely speak between streams of tears and sobs. At least a couple times. Did you get dressed for him? I did. It was getting harder and harder to hold myself together. I wasn't even sure he understood what I was saying through the constant sobbing, and I wanted it to stop, each question like a knife stabbing deeper into my heart. What did you give him, Jade? Did you give him the things you denied me? No, I didn't give them, but he took them and I let him. I sobbed uncontrollably again. I had just admitted that I had given another man my cherry. Embarrassment overcame me, and he saw that, so he told me to drink some water and calm down as much as possible. A few minutes later, I was sitting up, shivering but quite sane. He said a few more questions, and he would stop. You liked the sex, Jade. You went back to it again and again, so it had to be better than the one we had. I told you he's just not like you. You're loving, respectful, and he just takes me, and I don't know why, but it does something that I can't explain to myself deep down inside. It's wrong, but I can't help it. Please treat me the same. Punish me, make me your whore, not his. I couldn't hold back the copious flow of tears again and felt like I was about to pass out. Jade, one last question. I nodded. Do you love him more than you love me? That was it. It pushed me to my limit and I gasped until I passed out. When I came to, he picked me up in his arms and laid me down on the couch in the room. On the armrest of the couch was that dreaded manila envelope. I'm sorry, Jade, but we have to get this over with. Can you answer one last question? No, I don't love it at all. It was just an outlet. I don't know why or what made me keep coming back to him. It was like a drug, and like an addict, I became addicted. I knew the consequences, like all addicts, but I couldn't stop, even though I kept telling myself for days that it had to stop. What's going to happen now, Jimmy? Please, I'm begging you, don't leave me. We can work this out together. There has to be a way out. Jade, thank you. That concludes this part of the conversation. You can now pick up your copy, which is in the envelope. I sat down and took the envelope with trembling hands, marveling at how light it was. When I opened it, there was a single item inside, a small digital voice recorder. If you push the little button on the left, Jade, it stops the recording. I did so and examined the device. It confused me and my mind began to reorganize my thoughts. He had nothing but this little device I was holding, but of course he knew, and that was the problem. My husband knew. I had just admitted that I had betrayed him, and in the worst possible way. I thought about crushing him to destroy the evidence, but the real evidence was now part of our memories. So what was the point of destroying it? Jimmy, it doesn't make sense. You knew you should have known. You couldn't have picked out that underwear by accident, could you? When did you know? When I looked at him, his poker face was gone. He won, and I lost. Tears poured from his devastated eyes, and a deep loss was written on his face. I would never be able to rid myself of the image of my husband sitting at this very moment for the rest of my life. And at this moment I wished it were short. He spoke, his voice now barely audible. I found out about it on Friday, but I wasn't 100% sure. I needed you to tell me for sure. As you were getting out of the shower to talk to me, I suddenly noticed a brand new pair of underwear hanging on the door hook. It was just a reflection in the mirrored closet. But I saw it. You always hang your clothes there when you're getting ready. It was in the package, and I wanted it to still be in the package when I got home, but we both know it wasn't. I watched the footage from the doorbell as you left Friday night, noted the time, and carefully pausing the video, saw the part of your underwear as you turned around and kissed the camera. When you came back and did the same thing, you stood right in front of the camera a little longer, long enough to see that you were wearing a different bra, so you changed. When you left, I called my sister to note what time you showed up at the club. It was almost 2 o'clock, which meant 90 minutes of your time was unaccounted for. Thank you for telling me what you did for those 90 minutes. Up until that point, I was in the dark. I was trembling, but I had to ask the question. What now, Jimmy? Can you forgive me? Can we find a way forward? He looked at me with tears streaming from his eyes. I forgive you. I didn't let him finish. I jumped up and threw myself around his neck, kissing him again and again on his cheek, but stopped when I tried to kiss his lips. He didn't react in any way. His expression was blank again, and the tears were still falling. I pulled away from him. I forgive you, Jade. For that first time it happened. I can understand your pressure. I already knew you weren't in the best mental state during and after COVID. I talked to my sister. She has a friend whose wife was a nurse and died during COVID. Decent, attractive guy. Honestly, I was thinking of suggesting you set up immodest meetings if that would get you out of a dark place. As for all the other times you've cheated on me, I can't forgive them, and I can't look past them. I wanted to cry, but I had to take the little opportunity he gave me. Wait, Jimmy, you'd let me sleep with someone? Who cares, really? You're offering more than I did? When I was with Dan, I had an hour of nonstop hardcore sex, and yet you're suggesting that someone could do to me what you and I did. He walked across the room and picked up a vase. My vase. Jimmy, please don't. You know what that vase means to me. I know, Jade. I don't plan to do anything but look at it. I remember how proud you were of her in school when you made her. I remember how she was displayed in your senior year, showing that there were talented people in the school. We both fell in love with her. I'm not going to, but suppose I throw it against the wall so it shatters into thousands of shards. Suppose we spent a year looking for every tiny fragment until we were sure we had all the pieces, and then carefully glued it all back together. Would you still want to put it in a prominent place in our house? Would it still be the same? On the other hand, if we both agreed to lend it to someone who would appreciate it, would they return it intact? I knew where this conversation was going, but I had to keep going. I could barely whisper an answer. No, Jimmy. It would be noticeable that it had been glued together. It would look similar, but it wouldn't be the same. But if we lent it to someone, they would take care of it and return it safely. By the time I broke down and sobbed uncontrollably, I realized what it was all about. Our marriage was the equivalent of that vase broken into all those shards. Jimmy would only see it after it was repaired as a mended vase. The vase would never be the same. Our marriage would never be the same. If we had borrowed it, and by that he meant agreeing to some kind of relationship with someone else while he was away, our marriage would probably be intact too. So now what? I've already packed a couple of suitcases and talked to my sister about staying with her. You're staying here, you were a brilliant real estate agent, so get on with selling this house unless you don't need it and can't pay the mortgage to keep it. I want to be honest, we don't have kids, so it's 50-50 or so. Before I leave, would you be okay with that? I wanted to scream and yell that it wasn't fair, that I didn't want him to leave, but I knew my husband. He would never see our marriage in the same light, and it would fall apart. I didn't sob. I held back, but the tears ran down my cheeks like 2 mini rivers. He went upstairs and came down with 2 suitcases. He came over, and when the sobs started again, he hugged me tightly, and I realized that this was the way my husband would never hug me again. I could barely speak. If I could damn myself to an eternity in hell to hold you, I would, but I know I can't. If it means anything, I'm truly sorry for what I did. These things happen. Watching you for the last hour was punishment enough in my eyes, but you lost something that was dear to both of us. I pray that you can come to terms with that. Then he left, and I sat on the floor with the front door open and watched his car drive away from the house and probably never come back. I wanted to run into the kitchen and slit my wrist, But that would have been the easy way out for me, and I would have punished Jimmy even more than I had already managed to accomplish. In April 2024, I took my goddaughter Amy in my arms and dedicated my life to her. She was so tiny and helpless, and I was grateful for the opportunity. After Jimmy left me, I didn't realize that he had tendered his resignation from his job. I later learned that he planned to find some local work if his suspicions proved unfounded. Otherwise, he was planning to go overseas. Eventually, after he left me, 4 weeks later, he ended up in the U.S. When I found out, I couldn't handle it, but Jimmy asked his sister Beth to use my circle of friends to rally around me, and they managed to help me stay afloat. The house was sold pretty quickly, and up until that point, Jimmy continued to pay the bills and even paid me some money to get me through until the house was sold. I never contested the divorce, and 6 months later our marriage was just a statistic on the list of divorce cases in the UK. At that point, I wrote a letter which I passed on to his sister to forward to Jimmy. It didn't seem right to send a text message expressing my sadness and regret that I had done this to him. He didn't deserve it. To my surprise, I got a reply even though no address was given. He accepted my apology and apologized himself for putting me to the test when he tricked me into confessing to the affair. He also apologized for not being there for me when I needed him, and if time could have been turned back, he would have left the Riggs to be with me instead of leaving me when he knew I was depressed. He said he had to share some of the responsibility for what happened. That made me burst into tears, which was typical of Jimmy. I left Yorkshire, got a job at an estate agency in South London, and rented an apartment in Greenwich. It was hard to make such a drastic change, and I was close to giving up when I found a man I had fallen in love with and who now loved me back just as much. I was asked to look at a house that the owner wanted to put on the market, and I met Jerry, a quiet man in his 40s. It was an exceptionally beautiful 4-bedroom detached house in Bexley that would fetch a tidy sum. The house was completely empty, and when we reached the master bedroom, he collapsed and sobbed heartily. I held him tightly against me, promising him that everything would be okay. It turned out that his wife had died of cancer 6 months ago. He had moved out but knew he needed to sell the house, and this was the first time he had ever stepped foot in this house. Needless to say, love has blossomed. I am happily in a new marriage. I have an adopted son even though he is in his 20s. I was surprised when I received a message from Jimmy. He had remarried in America and had a daughter, Amy. I was hurt that he now had what I couldn't give him, a child. But at the same time, I was happy that he had what he had previously been willing to give up when he was married to me. He talked to his wife, Cassie, who agreed in principle for me to be Amy's godmother. Jimmy was in the UK and came to visit Jerry and me in Canterbury, near the cricket ground. Jerry's son went to university there and we both liked the area. Plus, it was close to the coast, which we had grown to love. When the doorbell rang, I trembled, not knowing what to expect. It was the first time I was going to come face to face with my ex-husband since the day he left our home. I walked to the door with Jerry, and he kissed me and told me that we were going to be okay. He held my hand tightly. I wanted to cry, but knew I shouldn't because when I opened the door, I saw a tanned Jimmy with a woman who looked at least 10 years younger than him, holding a small bundle named Amy. We escorted them into the house and began to get acquainted. Cassie was wary at first, but I think she quickly sensed that I was happy with my life, and within an hour we were like old friends. I knew Jimmy and Jerry wouldn't have a problem. They had similar personality traits, although as I became more intimate with Jerry as our relationship progressed, he was somewhere between Jimmy and Dan in the way he treated me in the bedroom. For a man who didn't deserve a second chance, I promised to never, ever stumble in my relationship. I went so far as to get a tattoo, which I had never done, on my upper left thigh. It was a small scroll that read, "Till death do us part." Above the top of the scroll it said Jerry, and just below that it said Jade. After lunch I talked to Jimmy and thanked him and apologized again. He smiled and said that, in the end, things worked out well for both of us. I couldn't have children, and Jimmy had accepted that our relationship would be like that, and having Amy and meeting Cassie was a big plus. He asked me what happened to Dan, why I didn't continue that relationship. "We didn't have a normal relationship, Jimmy. It was just brief sex on those Fridays, nothing more and nothing less. Neither of us gave a damn about the other. After you left and he found out, he dropped me like a stone, Not that I would have come back. What turned him on the most was that I was married. I know you were ready to divorce under the pretext that we were just estranged, but I told everyone everything, even though you already know about it from your sister. Rumors of him being a homewrecker with no morals spread on local social media. When another woman told the same story before COVID, his clientele dropped dramatically and the club closed. After that, he simply disappeared. As I was finishing my sentence, I saw that Jimmy was distracted by something. For a moment, I remembered the day his eyes had been averted from me during that fateful video call when he saw the reflection of my underwear in the mirrored glass. But this was different. He walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up what he mistook for a paperweight, but he, and only he, except me, knew exactly what it was. By that time, Jerry had come up. It's a strange piece of jewelry, but Jade said it's as important as her vase and important to us. She touches it every morning when she gets up and before we go to bed. She tells me it's what will cement our love forever. But I still don't understand why someone would put a cheap digital recorder into a block of clear acrylic to make a paperweight. Jimmy smiled and cast a sly glance at Jade, who was doing the same thing he was doing. It was evidence that she had learned her lesson. Never stop loving a good person, even for a second.